Last night, protesters threw stones at the municipality in the town of Shahin Shah, one of dozens of demonstrations across Iran. President Rouhani won 2 elections by promising Iranians that their lives would improve once he'd agreed to restrict the country's nuclear program in return for the lifting of sanctions. But although the economy is growing, few people have yet felt the benefit.
Many of them voted for Rouhani a few months ago. They are disappointed in him, in President Rouhani. Many of them did not vote. They do not have a leader, but they're frustrated, they're angry, and they want change.
The protests began in Mashhad last Thursday and rapidly spread, not just to big cities like Isfahan, Bandar Abbas and the capital Tehran, but more unusually to smaller centres all across the country and to outlying towns and villages. At first, people were protesting about the government's failure to relieve poverty.
It's unemployment, exhaustion and lies, the deceiving of the people.
In the last 2 days, the protests have become more political, people raging against the mullahs and the huge sums of money they absorb from the exchequer.
We're seeing, protests starting off about bread and butter issues, about economic issues, about the degree of corruption, to going into much more radical slogans calling for the downfall of the entire Islamic Republic. We've seen slogans of down with the dictator. So these slogans have become radicalized with each day going on, and also the protests themselves have taken a much more violent nature.
Welcome to a small town in Iran. Fulad Shah was burning last night. The numbers of protesters are small, but uprising in the likes of Fulad Shah could be big trouble for the regime. They're shouting Magbar Dictator, death to the dictator. And that's not good news for Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and his iron fist, the Revolutionary Guards.
Freedom! We want freedom!
In 2009, millions took to the streets of Tehran to protest against vote rigging. So why should much smaller numbers in 2018 pose a problem?
What they thought was a controlled burn has essentially spread into a wildfire that you're seeing in cities and provincial towns, places we haven't really seen protests since the 1979 revolution. And I think that's really interesting to note, especially when you look at the numbers. Whereas you had like millions of people taking the streets of Tehran, you're finding that hundreds, at most a few thousand people are taking to the streets right now. And I think that's interesting to note. While the numbers aren't big, the geography is.
This map produced by opponents of the regime points to how widespread the protests are. This is an uprising from across the country, but even more toxic to the powers that be in Tehran, it's coming from below.
Many of these cities, even Iranians don't know where they are. They're small towns. And what we know about these demonstrators is that they are poor. Many of them voted for Rouhani a few months ago. They are disappointed in him.
Death to the dictator, they chanted in Tehran, a direct reference to Iran's supreme leader, who today blamed foreign enemies for the protests. The government spokesman later named Britain, the US and Saudi Arabia.
The
enemy is waiting for an opportunity, for a crack through which it can infiltrate. Look at the recent day's incidents. All those who are at odds with the Islamic Republic have utilised various means, including money, weapons, politics and intelligence apparatus, to create problems for the Islamic system, the Islamic Republic and the Islamic Revolution.
This was the scene outside the Iranian embassy today. The people making their noise here are quite different to the demonstrators back in Iran, the people who are driving this latest uprising.